We return to the Marvel's rebooted Ultimate Universe with Ultimate Black Panther issue number 1. Only this time we break away from the big cities and dive into the turmoil taking place in the heart of Africa, as war brews between the upper and lower kingdoms and the kingdom of Wakanda. Now for those of you who are new to this channel or simply new to this series, the rebooted Ultimate Universe, also known as Earth 6160, is an alternate reality that originally mirrored that of Earth 616, until an alternate reality Reed Richards invaded this Earth and used a database of superheroes to remove any threats to his designs to this Earth. In a nutshell, he prevented the origins of those heroes from taking place. For example, he prevented Peter Parker from getting bit by the spider. Now, this world currently is ruled by the Maker's Council. It's divided up into 7 territories, with all of Africa being ruled by Lord Ra and Lord Khonshu. That is, except for Wakanda. And in this story, we see that Ra and Khonshu are raiding the western territories of Africa, laying waste to villages, and this is all being witnessed by some Wakandan spies who plan on revealing this to their king in the hopes that he will declare war on the upper and lower kingdoms to not only gain independence for these other countries, but to maintain the independence of Wakanda. Now, there are some interesting dynamics in this story. There are definitely some similarities between this story and the Black Panther of the MCU. And obviously, I mean prior to the death of T'Challa. But in this universe, T'Challa is married not to Storm, as you might expect if you've been reading Marvel Comics for some time, but instead to Okoye, the former head of the Dora Milaje and current queen of Wakanda, as well as being the mentor of the Dora Milaje. Now, their marriage is very formal according to tradition, but T'Challa is against traditions, much like his MCU counterpart, and he's hoping for a more equal and informal relationship between himself and Okoye. Now, this actually resembles more of the original version of Okoye and the Dora Milaje from Marvel Comics, because originally they were not these kind of bald-headed Amazon-type warriors. Like, they were skilled warriors, but their main purpose was to be, the Dora Milaje were the wives in training to the king. So they did learn combat skills, but they did so in the hopes of becoming the queen, because the king would need a queen who could defend not only herself, but the throne as well. In this panel from Black Panther from the late 90s, I believe, this is actually Okoye and Nakia, as the characters were seen in the MCU. Obviously, they look very different, and again, the Dora Milaje were quite different when they were first introduced in Marvel Comics than what they are now. They now more resemble the MCU version. But T'Challa has been having nightmares surrounding the events of Khonshu and Ra taking over Africa. And so he seeks counsel from his father T'Chaka, who is still alive but has retired from the position of king. And unfortunately for T'Challa, his father is still steeped in tradition and is disappointed to learn that his suggestion for dealing with his nightmares is to seek counsel from the Vodou Khan, who are priestesses who speak on behalf of the Vodou. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Vodou are, in the Marvel Universe, they are the name for the gods of Wakanda, which are kind of a blend of different pantheons from the real world. And so T'Challa seeks out the matron, or the high priestess of the Vodou Khan, and she warns him that enemies are not only drawing close to him from the outside and from the borders, but there are enemies on the inside of the kingdom as well. But with T'Challa's attitude towards the mysticism that she is steeped in, he somewhat disregards her warning, but pretends to respect it. It isn't until later that he finds out that, in fact, Khonshu and Ra are slaughtering villages throughout West Africa, but his sister Shuri, as well as Okoye and the spies, all try to convince T'Challa that it's their duty to go to war, but T'Challa reminds them that Wakanda still holds the element of surprise. They are still an invisible nation, and so even though people need their help, they should wait until the moment is right. Now, Shuri is against this, as are the Dora Milaje, except Okoye decides to take T'Challa's side, although she tells him that she's only taking his side because she actually believes it's a smart move and not because she's his queen. But in the current state of Wakanda, Shuri seems almost more warlike than T'Challa, and in fact, the Dora Milaje are in support of her because of the technology that she provides them. While T'Challa orders Wakanda to stay on guard but to not enter a war, Ra and Khonshu continue to decimate the people of West Africa. However, they have a protector in the form of Killmonger of all characters. Now, in this universe, he seems to be somewhat different than his original incarnation from the comics, although possibly more similar to the MCU version, just like T'Challa. As in this universe, Killmonger is more of a freedom fighter, at least from what it seems in issue 1. Now, even though he is obviously outnumbered, he isn't actually fighting alone. He's fighting alongside the quote-unquote Wind Rider, which of course can only be Storm from the X-Men, which is really interesting. I did not think we'd be seeing Storm in this comic. It's definitely an interesting dynamic to see Storm working alongside Killmonger while T'Challa is married to Okoye. But unfortunately, we don't learn anything about this version of Storm. We don't even get any dialogue from the character, so we don't know if she has been a part of the X-Men or if the X-Men even exist. Perhaps some point in the Ultimate Black Panther comics, Charles Xavier will come and recruit Storm. That's something I hope to see, but for now, it's interesting to see this dynamic, and I'm wondering at what point T'Challa and Storm will meet, and if there will be any romance between the two characters. Turning back to Wakanda, the country is celebrating their Life Day, when two followers of Khonshu and Ra end up killing T'Challa's father T'Chaka with a suicide vest, once again resembling his death in the MCU. Close relatives dying from terrorist attacks seems to be a theme, given that we know that Aunt May and Norman Osborn died from what is being labeled a terrorist attack, but was actually the Maker's Council trying to kill Tony Stark in Manhattan, I believe. And now, obviously, members of the Maker's Council killing the former king of Wakanda. Now, because of this outright attack, T'Challa is now aware that the forces of the Upper and Lower Kingdoms have infiltrated Wakanda, so it's no longer a war on their borders, it's a direct attack on their country. Even though he was averse to war just a few pages prior, he now declares war with the Moon Knight faction, which is kind of a weird name for, I guess, the army or organization that is led by both Ra and Khonshu, because only Khonshu is the god of the moon, Ra is the god of the sun. So it's odd that the entire army is called the Moon Knight. So this comic went straight into the action, which was pretty good, but at the same time, I felt like they kind of skimmed over T'Challa, who is the title character. Honestly, I felt more interested in all the other characters than T'Challa because it felt more like he was just reacting to events and he was reacting to other characters, whereas they were kind of doing their own thing, which isn't nearly as interesting as the 616 version of T'Challa, although it's definitely a step up from the original Ultimate Universe T'Challa, who was actually a mute and had very few parts to play in that universe. Again, there were many similarities to the MCU, which I don't mind too much. I think I would have preferred they go deeper into the lore of Wakanda, and even though we're aware that Wakanda is still at this point a hidden nation, what I would have liked to have seen is how T'Challa and his father T'Chaka view the rest of the world, whether or not they recognize the world is ruled by the 7-group council and ultimately by the Maker, and how that's affected Wakanda over time. The new costume design for T'Challa is pretty cool, except for the mouth hole, which is kind of weird. I don't understand why they added that part. And also, personally, I would have liked a return to the more traditional, like spandex or cloth costume, whatever Black Panther originally had. I haven't been a fan of the nanotech costumes, which is what everyone has now in the MCU, and except for characters like Tony Stark and Black Panther, most of the characters still stick to spandex or more toned down armor of some sort. So I would have liked to have seen a more traditional Panther costume, but it still looks cool. Unlike Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 1, Black Panther goes straight into the action, as I mentioned, and I felt like it would have been better if they had gone into a more thorough understanding of the character dynamics similar to Ultimate Spider-Man, especially given that the cast seems to be about as large. And of course, we're dealing with an entire country now, and the main character is the king of that country. I just think we could have used a little bit more background, especially given the world that these characters exist in. Not to mention that the start of the comic is T'Challa saying, "We're not going to go to war." And then at the end, the circumstances conveniently cause T'Challa to change his mind. It just seemed a little too quick. The impetus for war between Wakanda and the Upper and Lower Kingdoms should either have happened in issue 2 after things have been developed a little bit more, or it should have happened off-panel during Ultimate Universe or Ultimate Invasion, as it did for Ultimate Spider-Man in regards to the death of Aunt May and Norman Osborn. But overall, it was pretty good. And also, in reference to the other Ultimate Universe titles, this story actually takes place before the end of the Ultimate Universe, because in the end of that story, there was a panel where the North American Union's a news site was reporting on Black Panther leading an insurgency against the Upper and Lower Kingdoms. So that obviously didn't happen until he declared war openly and sent himself and his soldiers out into the rest of Africa and exposing themselves to the world. But yeah, it was a pretty good comic. I'm definitely looking forward to issue 2 because I'm hoping they expand more. I would like to know more about the world they grew up in, because obviously the Maker didn't prevent T'Challa from becoming the Black Panther, which is odd because he's not only like one of the, I mean, in the 616 universe, he's a member of the Illuminati, but also he's the king of Wakanda. You'd think the Maker would try to prevent not just a superhuman, but a superhuman lineage within a kingdom that has technology greater than the rest of the world and is currently hidden and could possibly strike back against the Maker or any one of the 7 territories at any point. That seems like a bit of a loose end that I hope gets explained at some point. Obviously, the Maker is currently still time displaced or trapped in time. So hopefully at some point, the Maker will come back and we'll get a more thorough explanation of his process of shutting down these heroes before they became heroes and how he chose who he was going to take out of the picture. But that's all I have for this issue. Let me know what you guys think about Ultimate Black Panther issue number 1 in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you would hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell so that you never miss out on a new video. Thanks for watching.